pilot went missing in 1975. His plane was found intact in a cave no one had ever explored. The ropes scraped against the limestone as Marcus descended into the darkness, his headlamp cutting through the black void like a sword through silk. 50 feet below, the cave floor waited, a mystery that had been sealed from the world for decades until last month's rockslide had torn open this hidden entrance. "You seeing this?" Marcus called up to his climbing partner, Elena, who was securing the rope above. His voice echoed strangely in the cavern, bouncing off walls he couldn't yet see. "What is it?" Elena's voice drifted down, tight with anticipation. They'd been exploring these Colorado mountain caves for 3 years, but something felt different about this one. The air moved differently here, carrying whispers of secrets buried in stone. Marcus's boots touched solid ground, and he immediately knew they'd found something extraordinary. The cave opened into a cathedral-sized chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows that his light couldn't penetrate. Stalactites hung like frozen tears, and the silence was so complete it seemed to press against his eardrums. But it wasn't the cave's natural beauty that made Marcus's heart race. There, sitting in the center of the chamber, as if it had been carefully parked, was an airplane. Not the twisted wreckage you'd expect from a crash, but a complete, intact single-engine aircraft that looked like it had been gently set down by giant hands. The white and blue paint was faded but clearly visible, and Marcus could make out registration numbers on the wing, N7749J. "Elena!" Marcus shouted, his voice cracking with excitement. "Get down here now! You're not going to believe this!" 20 minutes later, Elena stood beside him, her mouth open in disbelief. They walked slowly around the plane, their headlamps creating dancing shadows that made the aircraft seem almost alive in the darkness. "How is this even possible?" Elena whispered, running her fingers along the wing. "There's no way this thing flew in here." Marcus was already pulling out his phone, though he knew there was no signal this deep underground. "We need to call the authorities. This is incredible." The plane was a Cessna 172, probably from the 1970s based on the design. What struck them most was its condition. Yes, it was dusty and obviously aged, but the fuselage was complete, the propeller unbroken, even the windows intact. This wasn't a crash. It was as if someone had carefully landed the plane in an impossible place. Elena climbed onto the wing and peered through the cockpit window. "There's nobody inside, but there's stuff on the seats. Looks like maps, maybe a logbook." They spent the next hour documenting everything with their cameras, careful not to disturb anything. The cave itself was massive, easily large enough for a small plane to maneuver if there had been an opening. But the entrance they'd used was barely wide enough for a person. When they finally emerged into daylight, squinting against the afternoon sun, Marcus immediately called 911. Within 2 hours, the remote mountain location was buzzing with activity. Sheriff's deputies, federal aviation officials, and even a news crew had somehow appeared. Sheriff Patricia Valdez was the first official to descend into the cave. When she emerged 40 minutes later, her face was pale with amazement. "I've been doing this job for 23 years," she told the assembled crowd. "I've never seen anything like it." The real breakthrough came when aviation expert Dr. James Harrison arrived from Denver. After examining the plane's registration and cross-referencing it with federal databases, he made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the gathered crowd. "The aircraft belongs to Jack Callahan," Dr. Harrison announced, his voice carrying across the mountain clearing. "He was reported missing on October 15, 1975, during a solo flight from Grand Junction to Denver. He never arrived at his destination, and despite extensive search efforts, no trace of him or his aircraft was ever found." The crowd fell silent. October 15, 1975. 50 years ago, almost to the day. Among the onlookers, an elderly man stepped forward. Tom Callahan had driven up from the valley town of Cedar Ridge when he heard about the discovery on the radio. At 78, he moved slowly but with purpose, his weathered hands shaking slightly as he approached Sheriff Valdez. "That's my brother's plane," Tom said quietly. "I was 28 when Jack disappeared. I've been wondering what happened to him every day since. The sheriff's expression softened. Mr. Callahan, I'm sorry. This must be incredibly difficult for you. Tom nodded, staring at the cave entrance. Jack was 35, just got his pilot's license the year before. He was so proud of that little plane. Saved up for 3 years to buy it. His voice carried 5 decades of pain. We searched for months. Hired private investigators, organized volunteer search parties. Nothing. It was like he just vanished. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the scene, the officials began planning their next steps. The cave would need to be thoroughly investigated, the plane carefully examined, and most importantly, they needed to understand how it had gotten there. But standing there in the fading light, looking at the cave entrance that had hidden this secret for half a century, Tom Callahan felt something he hadn't experienced in 50 years. Hope. Not hope that Jack was still alive, he wasn't naive. But hope that maybe, finally, he would learn what had happened to his brother. The plane had been found. Now the real mystery could begin. As the officials packed up their equipment and prepared to secure the site overnight, Elena approached Tom. Mr. Callahan, I'm sorry we couldn't find your brother with the plane. Tom looked at her with eyes that had seen too much loss. Finding the plane is more than we've had in 50 years, young lady. And something tells me this is just the beginning. He was right. The discovery of Jack Callahan's plane would soon reveal a story of survival, determination, and tragedy that would captivate the entire nation. But more than that, it would finally bring peace to a family that had been haunted by questions for half a century. The cave held more secrets than just a perfectly preserved airplane. And tomorrow, the search for answers would begin in earnest. The next morning arrived gray and cold, with mist clinging to the mountain peaks like ghostly fingers. By 7 a.m., the cave site had been transformed into a makeshift command center. Yellow tape cordoned off the area, and a steady stream of specialists arrived in SUVs and official vehicles. Tom Callahan sat on a folding chair someone had brought him, clutching a thermos of coffee that had long since gone cold. He hadn't slept. How could he? After 50 years of wondering, of imagining every possible scenario, the answers were finally within reach. Dr. Harrison emerged from the cave for the 3rd time that morning, his face grim with concentration. He approached Sheriff Valdez and Tom, pulling off his helmet. "We need to talk," he said quietly. They gathered around a folding table covered with photographs and documents. Dr. Harrison spread out several images of the plane's interior and exterior. "This is remarkable," he began. "The plane didn't crash, it landed. Look at these landing gear marks in the cave floor. They're consistent with a controlled landing, not an impact." Tom leaned forward, studying the photos. "But how? There's no way that plane could have fit through the entrance we used." Dr. Harrison nodded grimly. "That's where it gets interesting. We brought in a geological survey team this morning. They found evidence of a major seismic event in this area." He pointed to a topographical map. "October 1975, the same month your brother disappeared, there was a 6.2 earthquake centered about 15 miles from here." Sheriff Valdez frowned. "You're saying the earthquake changed the landscape?" "Exactly. Look at these rock formations around the cave entrance. The geological team believes there was once a much larger opening here, large enough for a small aircraft to pass through. The earthquake caused a massive rock slide that sealed it off." Tom felt his heart racing. "So Jack, he could have landed inside the cave? It's the only explanation that makes sense." Dr. Harrison confirmed. "Your brother was an experienced pilot, even if he was relatively new to flying. If he was caught in bad weather or had mechanical trouble, he might have spotted the cave opening and made an emergency landing." The implications hit Tom like a physical blow. "If he landed safely, where is he?" That question hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Harrison pulled out another photograph, this one showing the plane's cockpit in detail. "We found something else," he said softly. "The cockpit is empty, but there are clear signs that someone left the aircraft alive. The pilot's door was found open, not damaged. And look at this. He pointed to a photograph of the plane's interior. The pilot's seat was pushed back, and personal items were scattered across the cabin: maps, a flight manual, what appeared to be a sandwich wrapper. But most telling is what's missing, Dr. Harrison continued. According to the aircraft's equipment manifest, there should be an emergency survival kit, a backpack, a water canteen, and a flashlight. All of those items are gone. Tom's hands shook as he processed this information. You're saying Jack survived the landing? All evidence points to it. And there's more. Dr. Harrison pulled out a leather-bound logbook. We found this in the cockpit. It's your brother's flight log. The last entry was made after he landed in the cave. Tom reached for the logbook with trembling hands. The pages were yellowed but remarkably well preserved in the dry cave air. He found the final entry, written in his brother's familiar handwriting. Emergency landing in cave due to sudden weather. Aircraft intact. No radio contact possible. Will attempt to find help. October 15, 1975, 4:30 p.m. J. Callahan. The entry stopped mid-sentence, as if Jack had been interrupted or had decided to act quickly. He was alive, Tom whispered, tears streaming down his face. After all these years of thinking he died in a crash, he was alive. Dr. Harrison placed a gentle hand on Tom's shoulder. We need to search the cave system thoroughly. If your brother left the plane, there might be more evidence of where he went. Sheriff Valdez was already organizing the search effort. We'll need cave rescue specialists, search dogs, and a full forensic team. This is now a potential survival situation from 1975. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. They were mounting a rescue operation for a man who had needed rescuing 50 years ago. As the day progressed, the search team made their first sweep of the immediate cave area. The chamber containing the plane was vast, but it connected to a network of smaller passages that extended deep into the mountain. Tom insisted on being part of the search, despite his age. I've been looking for my brother for 50 years, he told Sheriff Valdez. I'm not stopping now. By late afternoon, they had covered the main chamber and the first level of connecting passages. The cave system was larger than anyone had anticipated, with passages extending in multiple directions. And then, just as the sun was setting, they found the first real clue. In a narrow passage leading away from the main chamber, searcher Maria Santos called out, "I've got something here!" The team gathered around her flashlight beam, which illuminated clear footprints in the cave floor, footprints that had been preserved in the dry sediment for half a century. The prints led deeper into the darkness, toward passages that no one had explored in decades. Jack Callahan had indeed walked away from his plane. The question now was, where had he gone, and what had happened to him in the darkness of the mountain? The search resumed at dawn with renewed intensity. Tom hadn't left the mountain, spending the night in a motorhome that Sheriff Valdez had arranged for him. At 78, he should have been resting, but sleep was impossible when his brother's 50-year journey was finally being traced. The cave rescue team had arrived from Denver, bringing specialized equipment and expertise in underground search operations. Leading them was Captain Lisa Rodriguez, a veteran who had spent 20 years mapping Colorado's cave systems. "Mr. Callahan," she said, approaching Tom as he stood at the cave entrance. "I want you to know we're going to follow every lead, explore every passage. If there are answers down there, we'll find them." Tom nodded, his eyes fixed on the dark opening. Jack was always resourceful. Even as kids, when we got lost hiking, he'd figure out how to get home. If anyone could survive in those caves, it was him. The team descended in groups, following the footprint trail that Maria Santos had discovered. The prints were remarkably well preserved, leading from the main chamber through a series of smaller connecting passages. Each step told the story of someone moving deliberately, not in panic. Sarah Martinez, a local volunteer with the search and rescue team, had joined the effort after hearing about the discovery on the news. She was an experienced caver herself, having explored these mountains for 15 years. Something about the story had captured her heart. Maybe it was the thought of Tom waiting 50 years for answers, or the incredible survival story that was slowly emerging. The footprints are consistent, Captain Rodriguez reported over the radio. One person, moving steadily, not running or stumbling. Your brother was thinking clearly when he left the plane. 3 hours into the search, they made their first major discovery. In a wider chamber about 200 yards from the plane, searcher David Chen called out, "I've got something here." The team gathered around his light, which illuminated a carefully constructed fire pit. Blackened stones formed a circle, and the remnants of burned wood were still visible. Next to it, they found what appeared to be a makeshift bed, pine needles and fabric arranged in a rough rectangle. "He made camp," Sarah said softly. "Jack spent time here, trying to survive?" Tom, who had insisted on being part of the search despite the difficulty, knelt beside the fire pit. His aged hands touched the stones his brother had arranged half a century ago. "He was always good at camping. Dad taught us how to build fires, how to stay warm." But it was what they found next that truly broke everyone's heart. Scattered around the campsite were pieces of a blue fabric, remnants of what had once been a pilot's jacket. The fabric was faded and torn, but still recognizable. In one piece, they could make out part of a name tag. J. Callahan. He was trying to stay warm, Captain Rodriguez observed. Used his jacket for insulation or maybe to patch other gear. The search continued deeper into the cave system. The passages branched and twisted, creating a maze that would have been challenging even for an experienced caver. But Jack's trail continued, marked by occasional footprints and small signs of his passage. Then, in a narrow crevice that required crawling to access, Sarah made the discovery that would change everything. "There's something wedged back here," she called out, her voice echoing strangely in the tight space. It's a tin box." She carefully extracted a small, rusted metal container, the kind used for storing matches or small valuables. The box was sealed tightly, protecting its contents from the cave's moisture. The team gathered in the wider chamber as Captain Rodriguez carefully opened the container. Inside, wrapped in what appeared to be plastic from a cigarette pack, was a folded piece of paper. Tom's hands shook as he unfolded the note. The ink was faded but still legible, written in his brother's careful script. Day 3 in the caves. Found water source in Eastern Passage. Plane radio dead, no way to signal for help. Tried to find way out yesterday but passage is too dangerous and dark. Making camp here tonight. Food running low. If something happens to me, tell Tom I'm sorry for all the worry. Going to try Western Passage tomorrow, looks like it might lead to surface. Pray I make it. Jack Callahan, October 18th, 1975 . The silence that followed was deafening. Tom read the note twice, then a third time, as if the words might change. 3 days, he whispered. He survived at least 3 days. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. He was thinking about you, Mr. Callahan. Even in those circumstances, he was worried about how you'd feel. Captain Rodriguez studied the note carefully. He mentions a Western Passage. We need to find it. If he went that way, he might have made it out. Tom finished, hope creeping into his voice for the first time. But even as they prepared to search the Western Passages, everyone understood the reality. If Jack had made it out of the caves, he would have found help. He would have come home. The fact that he never did meant his journey had ended somewhere in the darkness ahead. Still, they pressed on, following the trail of a man who had refused to give up, who had fought for 3 days in the underground darkness, thinking of his brother and holding on to hope. Jack Callahan's story wasn't over yet. The Western Passage stretched ahead like a throat leading deeper into the mountain's belly. Captain Rodriguez's team had been mapping the cave system for hours, following Jack's 50-year-old trail through increasingly narrow and treacherous passages. Tom insisted on continuing despite his age, his determination unwavering. I've waited 50 years, he told Sarah when she suggested he might want to rest. I'm not stopping now when we're this close. Sarah had become his unofficial companion in the search, something about the elderly man's quiet strength drawing her in. She'd seen many rescue operations, but this felt different, more personal, more important. The Western Passage was different from the others. Where the previous caves had been relatively stable, this route showed signs of geological stress. Loose rocks littered the floor, and in several places, the ceiling had partially collapsed, creating obstacles that would have been dangerous even for an experienced caver. "Your brother was brave," Sarah observed as they navigated around a pile of fallen stones. "This passage would have been challenging even with proper equipment." Tom nodded, picturing his brother alone in the darkness with only a flashlight and whatever supplies he'd managed to carry. "Jack was never one to give up. Sometimes I think he was too stubborn for his own good." 3 hours into following the Western Passage, they found more evidence of Jack's journey. In a wider chamber, David Chen discovered another makeshift campsite, this one more elaborate than the first. Jack had built a wind barrier using loose rocks and had arranged what appeared to be a sleeping area. "He spent more time here," Captain Rodriguez noted. "Look at this, he collected water in this depression. He was thinking long-term survival." But it was what they found next that told the real story of Jack's final days in the caves. Near the campsite, partially hidden under a ledge, they discovered Jack's compass, an old military surplus model that Tom recognized immediately. "Dad gave us each one when we turned 16, Tom said, holding the rusted instrument. "Jack never went anywhere without it." The compass was broken, its needle spinning freely. But beside it, scratched into the cave wall with what must have been a knife or sharp rock, were marks that made everyone's heart sink. Tally marks. 7 groups of 5, then 3 individual marks. 38 days. "He was down here for more than a month," Sarah whispered, the enormity of it hitting everyone at once. Tom stared at the wall, his brother's determination carved in stone. 38 days. He fought for 38 days. The passage continued beyond the campsite, but the going became increasingly difficult. The cave narrowed, forcing them to crawl in places, and the air grew thin. After another hour of careful progress, they emerged into a chamber that made everyone stop and stare. Natural light was filtering in from above, not much, but enough to see that they were near the surface. A shaft led upward, partially blocked by rocks and debris, but clearly showing sky beyond. "He made it," Tom breathed. "Jack found a way out." But Captain Rodriguez was examining the shaft more carefully, and her expression was grim. "Mr. Callahan, I need you to look at this." At the base of the shaft, partially buried under decades of fallen rocks and debris, they found the remnants of what had once been a rope, clearly makeshift, woven from fabric and whatever materials Jack had available. "He tried to climb out," Rodriguez explained. "But the shaft is nearly 60 feet straight up, and the walls are loose shale. Without proper equipment." They didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood what had happened. Sarah was the first to spot them, scattered around the base of the shaft, barely visible under the accumulated debris of 50 years. "Bones. Human bones. We found him," she said quietly. The team worked with reverent care, carefully excavating the area. Along with the remains, they found Jack's knife, still sharp despite the decades. A few personal items had survived: a wedding ring that Tom didn't recognize, a small photograph protected by a plastic sleeve, and most remarkably, a small leather notebook. Tom held the photograph up to the light filtering down from above. It was a picture of 2 young men standing beside a small airplane, Jack and Tom, taken just weeks before the fatal flight. "He carried this with him," Tom said, his voice breaking. "Through 38 days in the caves, he carried a picture of us." The notebook was Jack's final gift to his brother, a day-by-day account of his survival, his hopes, his fears, and his thoughts about the family he'd left behind. Sarah opened it carefully, reading aloud the final entry. Day 38. Found the shaft. Going to try to climb out today. If I don't make it, I want Tom to know I never stopped trying to come home. I never stopped thinking about him. Tell him I'm sorry for all the worry. Tell him I love him. Jack. The search was over. After 50 years, Jack Callahan had finally been found. But for Tom, standing in that chamber where his brother had made his final desperate attempt at freedom, The real journey was just beginning. He finally had the answers he'd sought for half a century, but he also had something else: the knowledge that his brother had never given up, had never stopped trying to come home. The journey back to the surface felt like a funeral procession. Tom clutched Jack's leather notebook against his chest, the weight of 50 years of questions finally answered, but at a cost that left his heart both full and broken. Emergency responders had arrived to carefully transport Jack's remains from the cave. The process took hours, with each bone treated with the respect due to a man who had fought so hard to survive. Tom watched from the cave entrance as his brother finally made the journey home he tried so desperately to complete. Sheriff Valdez approached Tom as the sun began to set behind the mountains. "Mr. Callahan, I know this is difficult, but the coroner will need to examine the remains. It's standard procedure." Tom nodded, understanding. "Will I be able to? Will there be a proper burial?" "Of course. Once the examination is complete, your brother will be returned to you." That evening, in the quiet of his motel room in Cedar Ridge, Tom finally opened Jack's notebook fully. What he found inside wasn't just a survival log, it was a letter to him, written over 38 days of hope and desperation. Day 1, made emergency landing in cave. Plane intact but radio dead. Going to find way out tomorrow. Don't worry about me, Tommy. I'll be home soon. Day 5, cave system bigger than expected. Found water source. Food running low but still optimistic. Remember when we got lost on Grandmother Mountain? I found the way then, I'll find it now. Day 12, getting weak. Found some edible moss, but it's not enough. Keep thinking about Sunday dinners at Mom's house. Would give anything for her pot roast right now. Day 18, found the Western Passage. Looks promising. Tom, if you're reading this, I need you to know something. I'm not afraid. I keep thinking about what Dad used to say, Callahan men don't quit. I won't quit. Day 24, made it further than yesterday. Found a shaft that might lead to surface. Going to rest and try tomorrow. Tom, I hope you got married. I hope you had kids. I hope you're happy. You deserve happiness. Day 30, tried the shaft today. Too weak to make it all the way. But I can see sky. I can see blue sky, Tommy. Tomorrow I'll try again. Day 35, been thinking about everything we never got to talk about. How I was scared to tell you I was thinking about proposing to Mary Henderson. How I was worried about disappointing Dad by not taking over the hardware store. Funny how none of that seems important now. Day 38, this is it. I'm going to make it out today or, well, I'm going to try. Tom, you were the best brother a man could ask for. You made me laugh when I was sad, you shared your Halloween candy even though I ate all mine first, and you never told Mom when I broke her favorite vase. I need you to do something for me. I need you to live. Don't spend your life wondering what happened to me. I'm at peace with this. I fought as hard as I could, but some battles you don't win. That doesn't mean they weren't worth fighting. Find someone to love. Have a family. Be happy. And sometimes, when you're sitting on the porch watching the sunset, think about your big brother who never stopped trying to come home to you. I love you, Tommy. I always have. I always will. Tom read the notebook 3 times that night, tears streaming down his face. But they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of closure, of a love that had survived 50 years of separation. The next morning, Sarah knocked on his motel room door. She'd driven down from the mountain to check on him, bringing coffee and the kind of quiet companionship that only comes from shared experience. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Tom showed her the notebook, reading aloud some of the passages. Sarah listened in silence, occasionally wiping away tears. "He sounds like he was an amazing man," she said finally. "He was. And you know what? He was right. I did get married. I did have kids. I have grandchildren now." Tom smiled through his tears. "I had a good life, Sarah. But there was always this hole, this question mark. Jack filled it, even after all these years." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the morning light creep across the mountains where Jack had spent his final days. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked. Tom closed the notebook gently. "What Jack told me to do. I'm going to live. I'm going to call my daughter and tell her about her uncle she never got to meet. I'm going to plan a funeral where the whole town can say goodbye to the man who became a legend. And I'm going to stop wondering and start remembering." He looked at Sarah with eyes that seemed lighter than they had in decades. "Jack's been gone for 50 years, but his love came home yesterday. And that's enough. That's more than enough." For the first time in half a century, Tom Callahan slept peacefully, knowing his brother was finally home. 2 weeks later, Tom stood at the cave entrance one final time, Sarah beside him. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of winter. The official investigation was complete, the site would be sealed tomorrow for safety reasons, and Jack's funeral had been held 3 days ago. The service had been everything Tom had hoped for, not the somber, question-filled gathering he'd imagined for 50 years, but a celebration of a man who had shown extraordinary courage in his final days. The church had been packed with people who had grown up hearing the legend of the missing pilot, and who now knew the truth of his remarkable fight for survival. "I keep thinking about what he wrote," Tom said, his voice carrying easily in the mountain silence. "About how he could see blue sky from that shaft. He was so close." Sarah nodded, understanding. She'd become more than just a volunteer who'd helped with the search, she'd become a friend, someone who understood the weight of what they'd discovered together. "He made it out in a way," she said softly. "His story made it out. His love for you made it out." Tom approached the cave entrance, running his weathered hand along the rock face. Somewhere deep inside, Jack's plane still sat in its underground hangar, a monument to a journey that had begun 50 years ago and was only now ending. "I used to dream about this moment," Tom said. "About finding Jack, about getting answers. I thought it would feel different. How does it feel?" Tom considered the question, watching clouds drift across the mountain peaks. "Peaceful. For the first time in 50 years I feel peaceful." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a photograph, the same one Jack had carried in the cave, showing 2 young brothers standing beside a small airplane. But this was the original, the one Tom had kept on his mantelpiece for 5 decades. "I thought he should have this," Tom said, placing the photograph on a small ledge near the cave entrance. "So he's not alone in there." Sarah wiped away a tear. "That's beautiful, Mr. Callahan." They stood in comfortable silence, 2 people who had shared an extraordinary experience and found something precious in the darkness. The mountain wind whispered through the trees, and for a moment, Tom could swear he heard his brother's voice in it, not words, but the feeling of presence, of love, of a bond that death couldn't break. "I have something for you," Tom said, turning to Sarah. He handed her a small leather journal, new, but similar to the one Jack had carried. "Jack wrote about living, about not spending your life wondering. You helped me understand what he meant." Sarah opened the journal, finding an inscription on the first page. "For Sarah, who helped bring a brother home. May your own adventures be filled with wonder and safe returns. Tom Callahan." "I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered. "Say you'll use it. Say you'll keep exploring, keep helping people, keep living the way Jack wanted me to live. I promise." Tom took one last look at the cave entrance, then turned away. As they walked back down the mountain trail, he began to tell Sarah stories about Jack, not the tragic story of his disappearance, but the joyful memories of their childhood, their adventures, their dreams. "He wanted to be a commercial pilot," Tom said. "Said he was going to fly people all over the world. Instead, he became something better. He became a reminder of what it means to never give up, to love your family, to fight for every day you're given." At the bottom of the trail, Tom's grandson was waiting in his truck. 25-year-old Michael had driven up from Denver to take his grandfather home, and to hear the stories firsthand. "Grandpa," Michael said, "I want to learn to fly. I want to get my pilot's license." Tom smiled, seeing Jack's adventurous spirit alive in a new generation. Your great-uncle would have liked that. He would have been proud. As they drove away from the mountain, Tom looked back one final time. The cave entrance was already disappearing behind the trees, but he wasn't sad. Jack wasn't trapped in that cave anymore. He was free, his story told, his love delivered. That evening, Tom called his daughter in California and told her everything. He talked about Jack's courage, his love, his final message. He planned a trip to visit his other grandchildren, to share the stories that had been locked away for 50 years. The mystery that had haunted the Callahan family was finally solved. Jack had come home at last, not in the way anyone had hoped, but in the way that mattered most. His love had survived 50 years of darkness, and his spirit would live on in the family he'd fought so hard to return to. The legend of the missing pilot was over. The story of Jack Callahan's love had just begun.